Hi everyone, nice to see you. I'd like to also begin by acknowledging the Kaurna people and pay my respects to their elders past and present and emerging, and to any First Nations folk who might be in the room today. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Kate Raynor and I'm the Director of the Centre for Equitable Housing at Per Capita, which is a think tank. And it's a think tank based in Melbourne. I'm from Brisbane originally, so I'm trying to push down the imposter syndrome of talking about a South Australian housing crisis with that background. But I do acknowledge that a lot of what I'm presenting on today is based on work that I'm doing with the Wyatt Trust at the moment, some of whom are in the room. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to present on that. And I've spent the last couple of months speaking to a lot of people, some of whom are in the room, about their experiences of the Adelaide and South Australian housing crisis. So it's very much informed by the data, but also discussions with people from these parts. So I'm talking about the missing middle in South Australia's rental sector. And I want to talk a little bit, I think, about a lot of things that you will already know inherently, but just kind of putting some figures on it, which is just a bit of a discussion about what's happened in the home purchase sector in South Australia recently, what's happened to the rental market, and what are the flow-on impacts of that before we flow into the panel. And as I'm sure you'll all be aware from living in this city, house prices in Adelaide and South Australia are and have become bananas, and they're up 85% from COVID, so up 85% since April 2020. And in regional South Australia, they're up 89%. So great if you already own your own home, fabulous, wonderful. Terrible if you're trying to exist in this housing market as a first home buyer or as someone who's fallen out of the market and tried to move back into it. And of course, when you have house price increases, there's a whole bunch of flow-on effects that happen across the market as well. And we know that rental prices have also increased significantly in South Australia and Adelaide, and they're up 52% from the beginning of COVID, from April 2020. But most of that growth has happened in the last 3 years. So we've seen this really significant kind of uptick, and of course that's being felt by everyone, but particularly felt by people at the lower end of the income spectrum, with a whole bunch of implications from that as well. And I've put this slide in. It's probably too much detail for the size you can see it at, but it's actually a reflection on a conversation I was having with Jo from Wyatt Trust last week, talking about, I haven't told her I'm about to talk about her, talking about the fact that if you had moved into a rental in Adelaide 3 years ago, perhaps you wouldn't be feeling so stressed right now. But if you're moving into a rental now, it's totally cooked, and it's a really different scenario. And that is the case. These graphs up here show what percentage of properties have had a rental price increase from one tenant to the next in a year. And what it shows is that through 2023, about 95% of homes that moved from one tenant to another on a contract increased their rental price. So pretty much across the board, across Australia, if you were in a rental property, that rental property, if you owned a rental property, you put your rental prices up. The same is true if you're already in a home. It's not to the same degree, but through 2023, about 80% of sitting tenants experienced an increase in rental price while they were still in the home. And a lot of those rental price increases were by over 10%. So you have been somewhat buffered if you were already in a home, but not completely. It's a pretty widely experienced experience to either have to move homes and move into a rental market that has increased, or stay in your home and just pay more to be in the same place. So obviously, we're seeing this pressure if you're a renter, and you're probably not seeing your income increase at the same rate. This was meant to have transitions in it, but it doesn't. That's fine. What this image or this slide has is an image of what rental affordability looks like in Adelaide right now, Q2 2025. And the red colour is severely unaffordable, and the orange colour is unaffordable. And so if you look right across Adelaide, this is fantastic work from SGS Economics and Planning. They do really great work around rental affordability indexes. Right across Adelaide, there is nowhere that is affordable. There's one little green island up there, which is Salisbury. But what is wild to me is that the picture on the other side of the screen is only from 2021. So it's not like this is a 10-year transition from an affordable city to an unaffordable city. It's happened really, really recently that we have this big flipping of unaffordable to, from affordable to unaffordable spaces to live. And I should also point out that this orange and red colour scheme is for an average rental household. It's not for someone on government support payments. It's not for a pensioner. If you changed it over to a pensioner or someone who's a single person on government support payments, the whole thing just like explodes and starts laughing because nothing is affordable anywhere. So it's a really dire picture, but I think you already know that. You're all in this room. One thing that I wanted to say is that this discussion is changing, and we're more and more talking about the fact that working families are experiencing housing stress. We're more and more talking about this as a middle class issue or as a working person issue. But still to keep in mind that anything that happens in a housing market that makes housing more expensive is going to be disproportionately experienced by people who are vulnerable. So just in the context of that, we know that 1 in 8 adults live in poverty, 1 in 6 children live in poverty, and you're more likely to be living in poverty, experiencing housing stress if you are unemployed, if you're currently living in public housing, if you're a single parent. We know the vast majority of single parents are women, so there's very much a gendered element to that, or if you're First Nations, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person. Or to just summarise the last slides in one sentence, a comment from someone I was speaking to as part of this project I'm doing with the Wyatt Trust. A woman said to me, I have worked in homelessness for 23 years and I've never seen anything like this. And that was a pretty unanimous kind of commentary across the board, that it's a moving feast and it's a stressful time to be a low-income household and also a service provider in that context. And to kind of talk about the flow-on implications of that, one person said to me, we're seeing a new wave of homelessness from people who have never accessed services before. All these new entrants, low and middle income earners who used to manage on their own are now seeking help due to rising rents and cost of living pressures. So it's a new cohort moving into this system. Terrible for them. But also, one person saying, because there's a squeeze on the private rental market, more people are entering the homelessness system. It means that those who are chronically homeless are staying in homelessness longer. So of course, a new cohort, but if you're already vulnerable, you're just getting more and more squeezed, and the disadvantage is more and more profound. I have chucked in a couple of slides at the end just for things that I find hopeful, and to reflect on the presentations we had today. I do feel hopeful about the HAF. I do feel really hopeful about Housing Australia, about increasing federal government involvement in housing and homelessness. I think the Help to Buy scheme is fascinating, because in a South Australian context, because obviously you've had Home Start for decades, and so this kind of model is not new here, but the rest of Australia is like, what? Catching up with South Australia. So I think that's very interesting. I think it's positive that we've seen a really relatively significant increase in Commonwealth rental assistance in the last 3 years, and I think that has had an impact. The HAF existing is great. The National Housing Accord is a positive thing. I'm a little bit concerned about this policy shift towards affordable rather than social housing. I think that it's positive that we're talking about affordable housing as long as it's affordable and social, not affordable instead of social. And sometimes that occurs and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm just watching that one with care and rightful skepticism, as is my nature. In terms of state government things that I'm excited about, I do think this focus on supply is really positive as long as it's supply of social and affordable and public and private sector housing, which this discussion today has very much been about. I think the fact that there is renewed focus on social housing delivery and increasing involvement in public housing from the state government, super positive thing. I like that the last half round had a focus on transitional housing. I think that's really positive. And I think that the new rental tenancy laws, which I hope we'll discuss in the panel and is not my area of expertise, but probably is of other people, has had a really positive impact for tenants in South Australia. So they're all really good things. So I'll wrap up so that I don't take up too much of the time. But what I'm hearing is this topic of bottlenecks, that if we've got incredible pressure on our private rental sector, it's pushing issues downwards into our social housing sector. It's meaning that people can't leave the social housing sector. There's gaps and there's bottlenecks in the systems all over the place. Another key conclusion or observation from me is just the speed at which affordability has disintegrated in South Australia. It's just happened so quickly. How do you respond to that in this moving feast? Definitely there's new cohorts in stress, although the existing cohorts, we can't forget about them. They're even more stressed. I think it's really positive that we have all of these new funding and partnership opportunities. I always plug that supply alone will not deliver affordable housing. Supply alone will not deliver affordable housing. So it's great that we're talking about a spectrum. And I really enjoy that I'm now doing work in South Australia in a state that has home start and affordable home ownership as a thing you've been doing for ages. Very interesting to me. And also the affordable housing overlay. I also find that very inspiring coming from a state that is terrible at inclusionary zoning. So it's great to be learning in that context as well. I will stop speaking and let the panel component begin and finish there. Thank you very much.